You know, you might be surprised to learn the type of shit some of the most powerful people on Earth read. Some presidents have this extremely refined taste in literature. That's the end of that sentence. My original idea was to go through literally every single president in US history and rank all of them, but I quickly realized that it's extremely unpractical. For God's sake, according to this article, Millard Fillmore's favorite book was the fucking dictionary. How do you even quantify that? Like, can I just read any random dictionary, or do I have to read specifically one from the 1850s with words like giggle mugging? Instead, I've decided I'm just going to focus on the most relevant presidents to our modern age, so like the last 6 or so presidents, give or take. I do have some ground rules. To start, I will be ranking each president in question and not the book I'm basing my opinion on. This is because I will be using a variety of metrics. First, how good is the book? Kinda the idea behind the whole video. Second, how generic of a choice is it as a favorite read? Don't come to me and say your favorite film is Citizen Kane, say it's Madagascar 2: Escape to Africa. Third, how does this choice reflect the president in question? This isn't necessarily qualitative, but if you have a president whose favorite book almost perfectly represents who they are, it's like a little cherry on top, you know? And finally, if your favorite book is the Holy Bible, I am not counting it. We're just gonna go down to the second favorite. And if that's some bullshit like the dictionary, then we move on to the next one. I want to mention that this ranking is nothing more than for the sake of comedy, entertainment, and maybe education. So I'd appreciate it if we can mostly steer clear of politics. Obviously, I have my own political biases in real life, but I'm going to try to have them not affect the ranking. Starting off with the president that was this close to blowing up Big Bird, we got Ronald Reagan. His favorite book was The Hunt for Red October by Tom Clancy? Like the guy from the video games? Nah, that's crazy. Okay, not joking for a moment. I didn't actually know that Tom Clancy was an author and not just some name that Ubisoft pulled out of their ass to sound more important until like not that long ago. So Ronald Reagan, obviously a pretty important, extremely conservative president. This man is known for playing a massive role towards ending the Cold War. Very patriotic, a massive pro-capitalist, and even coined the term Reaganomics, which refers to the hilariously American idea of trickle-down economics. Only Americans would glaze billionaires this hard. So of course, it feels appropriate that his favorite book is the epitome of the bald eagle, macho man, machine gun shooting action hero American. The Hunt for Red October isn't too different from other Cold War dramas from the time, but it's notable for having a massive effect on Reagan. This president became so obsessed with Red October that he basically kickstarted Tom Clancy's entire career. Moreover, in an extremely important 1986 meeting with Soviet Union leader Mikhail Gorbachev that could have led to the destruction of all nuclear arms from both the US and the Soviet Union, Reagan prepared by, and this is real, reading Red Storm Rising, Tom Clancy's novel about a potential Third World War developing between NATO and the Soviet Union. Which is just wild. A meeting, mind you, that ended in failure, because of course it did. The Hunt for Red October is a lot of things, but arguably the most important one is that it's very American. The plot focuses on a Cold War conflict between a nuclear Soviet submarine called the Red October and the US government. The sub is approaching American territory, which would break a treaty between the US and the Soviet Union, but one Jack Ryan suspects that the reason for this is because the crew of the Red October wants to defect to the US. And so starts a series of mind games and submarine warfare as Jack Ryan and the US government tries to bring these Soviet soldiers to American soil, all while ensuring that the Soviet Union never realizes it. It's a bit more complicated than this, but the plot summary gives you a general idea. You know, going into these books, I try and ask myself what it is about them that makes it attractive to the presidents. For this one, it was pretty obvious. Red October is a certified guns-blazing, bald eagle, burger-loving American story, especially in contrast to the Soviets. It borders on propaganda. The Soviets in this book, especially that of the captain of the Red October, Ramius, are portrayed as good men seeking better lives outside of the Soviet Union instead of the stereotypical communist Soviet. Though the novel still punctuates how bad communism is and showcases that these men, these good, hard-working men, could lead much, much better lives in the United States. And this couldn't be more obvious than in the scenes where the Americans show the Soviets what life in the US is like, and the Soviets are just like, people have cars? You got Star Wars? Burgers? Man, the Americans really have it all figured out. I was expecting a lot of high-stakes action, but the book almost exclusively focuses on pretty down-to-earth dialogue that serves only to continue the plot. Very little do we see characters develop and grow as Clancy just moves from one plot point to the next. I think this has strengths and weaknesses. On one hand, focusing so heavily on the plot makes it more engaging and by extension, more of a page-turner. However, this also makes the plot a little all over the place. We cut from reunions with the US president, who's clearly modeled around Reagan himself, to dialogues and conflicts with the Russians in the Red October, and then there's Jack Ryan, who's supposed to be the protagonist, but really does not get a lot of page time. From this perspective, it's actually one of the book's biggest weaknesses. In my opinion, it would have been more interesting if the entire book was told through just one perspective, probably that of Jack Ryan, instead of constantly flip-flopping between half a dozen different perspectives. From the beginning of the book, we know that the Red October, and by extension Romulus, wants to defect to the United States, but I actually think it would have been a lot more interesting if we didn't know that. What if the Red October doesn't actually want to defect to the US? What if Jack Ryan is just wrong? What if this is all some elaborate trap set by the Soviets? You got stakes here. Similarly, other than Jack Ryan and Romulus, I never really felt like I knew any of these characters, nor did I feel like I saw them through go a proper arc. Though I will say, and these are some spoilers for near the end of the book, when Jack Ryan and Romulus do inevitably meet, the dialogue exchange between them is probably some of the best in the book. I know it sounds like I don't like this text, but it's actually quite the opposite. Overall, I thought it was very enjoyable, though it was bogged down by some odd choices. This isn't helped by a prose that I just can't get behind. A lot of it focuses on taking a character and going on this drawn-out expositionary backstory that focuses more on the politics of it all than on the individual character. Not to say you can't have politics in literature, but they should have some kind of profound effect, some notable effect on the character. Something that deepens my understanding of who they are without just blatantly telling me. Though I see the idea. I think if you give Clancy a couple more books, you'd have something truly special. And boy did he write a bunch more books, but I'm not reading those. I think the book itself is probably high B tier, but I'm actually gonna bump up Reagan to the A tier just for having such a unique pick. So I'm only going to spend a little time talking about Washington, just because I think it will be interesting. Obviously, pretty iconic president. First one, fought the British, was the only one who never wanted to be president. His favorite book is cool, though it's not really a book but a play. Cato, a tragedy written by Joseph Addison, takes place in Roman times and follows one Stoic named Cato who retreats to the African kingdom of Numidia as he resists Julius Caesar's rise to power. Pretty cool premise, never heard of this author. I'm gonna be real, I read this pretty casually, didn't really take extensive notes. It was a pretty short read though. Reading Cato was kind of, I'd say nuanced. As mentioned, this isn't really a book as it is more of a play script. It's pretty much exclusively dialogue, which is pretty annoying because you can tell that this was meant to be played in a theater and not read on text. But I was surprised at just how much of the book is focused on this dumbass love triangle between the sons of Cato, the king of Numidia, Juba, and these girls Marcia and Lucia, I'm not sure how you pronounce it. It's just so weird how much of the play is dedicated to this instead of the actual conflict. Though I will say, characters are fun, they're layered, cathartic. My favorite part is this very unique character moment where Cato reflects on the works of Plato through his own unique vision as a Stoic. It's a nice monologue that echoes the to be or not to be monologue from Hamlet. Going to the tier list, I enjoyed Cato fine, I guess, but it does get extra points for being such a unique pick, so I'm putting Washington on the low A tier next to Reagan. Next, we got Bill Clinton, really my favorite William, who's been president. Now, William is into quite a few things, but obviously, his favorite book is Lolita by Vladimir Nabokov. Like, come on, obviously. Though I've also heard that he's a massive fan of the film Peeping Tom. And I just got news that his favorite anime is Boku no Pico. Nah, I'm joking. In reality, William's favorite book is Meditations by Marcus Aurelius. My god, is that a boring ass pick. Though, lucky for me, I actually read and studied Meditations last year, so I'm already pretty familiar with the book. Pretty coincidental that I just finished reading a play about a Stoic and then went straight into a book all about Stoicism. Maybe it's a sign from the gods. The thing about Meditations and Stoicism as a whole is that, like most philosophies, it's hard to put it in a box. It's something that runs pretty deep and complex. I can't really sit here and make an accurate summary or explanation about what Meditations entails when that can change drastically depending on who you ask. If you're unfamiliar, Meditations are the raw, unedited thoughts of one Marcus Aurelius, who was Emperor of Rome from 161 to 180. And when I mean unedited, I literally mean this was never meant to be published. It's just his stream of consciousness. But in his core, Aurelius was a philosopher and a Stoic, which means that Meditations is a book that makes no goddamn sense. Yeah, this is far from light reading. I'm gonna try and make a very, explain like I'm 5 definition of Stoicism. Effectively, Stoicism rejects all notions of materialism and social acceptance in regards to achieving happiness. Stoics believe that focusing on yourself and achieving the main values of wisdom and courage are what will lead you to satisfaction in life. Do not take this as a by-all accounts of what Stoicism is, because again, it's very variable, depends on person to person, but it gives you a general idea. In fact, I'm pretty sure there's a guy in the comments right now explaining in detail what Stoicism actually is and calling me a fucking idiot. Which, fair enough, I welcome this kind of discussion, but it's important to keep in mind that you can't put philosophy in a box. With that said, Meditations is still incredible as far as philosophy books go. If you subscribe to the Stoic belief, this is the place to go to and return to expand your knowledge and deepen your understanding of the philosophy. Me personally, I'm a pretty big fan of it. This book kind of marked my start of reading philosophy and exploring a lot of different philosophers and their writings. Though I can't really critique it in the same way I could critique Red October, for example. It's not really a book as it is just a source of knowledge for Stoics. I guess I could sit here and make an extremely elaborate and comprehensive critique of Stoicism, but that would take way too long, and God knows this video is long enough. I will put here my favorite quote from Aurelius. In the morning when thou risest unwillingly, let this thought be present. I am rising to the work of a human being. Why then am I dissatisfied, if I am going to do the things for which I exist and for which I was brought into the world? Or have I been made for this, to lie in the bed clothes and keep myself warm? But this is more pleasant. Does thou exist then to take thy pleasure, and not at all for action or exertion? Does thou not see the little plants, the little birds, the ants, the spiders, the bees, working together to put in order their several parts of the universe? And art thou unwilling to do the work of a human being? And dost thou not make haste to do that which is according to thy nature? To me, this quote really represents the heart of why somebody would subscribe to the Stoic belief. Sometimes it can be difficult to see what the point in life is. From the quote, you could reach the conclusion that the point of life is to get up and work because that's just what humans do. But to me, it goes a bit deeper than that. To me, going out and living is almost like fulfilling your part in nature. Like finding your rightful place in the universe and in that finding happiness. Because like the bees and the ants, what else can be more beautiful than living a layered life? With that said, pretty generic choice, William. Like, come on, impossible to understand philosophy book. That's like every stuck-up academic's favorite book, okay? Oh, what's your favorite book? Oh, well, I'm a Stoic who believes in courage or some shit, so I like philosophy. William is going on B for Bill, should have picked Lolita.
Hi, welcome to McDonald's. Can
So I'm taking another quick detour here to talk about another head of Mount Rushmore. The face of laughing just a little too hard out of play, Abraham Lincoln. So Lincoln didn't have a specific book he liked above all others, but he did have a favorite author in Shakespeare. Now obviously I haven't read all of Shakespeare's work, because there's like quite a few of those. Hamlet, Macbeth, Romeo and Juliet, Richard III, Much Ado About Nothing, all iconic works in their own right. Now in my personal opinion, Shakespeare is a banger of an author. He was the first writer to really modernize story structure. Obviously, story structure has existed since the days of the Greeks, but Shakespeare brought it into something much closer to what we use today with the 5-act story structure. I'd say that's one of the main reasons why he's still such an influential writer to this day, and probably one of the most influential figures in the English language, which is a hell of a basic ass statement. And that's the thing with saying that Shakespeare is your favorite author. It's like, come on. I know it's the 1860s and all, but you couldn't have picked a less generic choice. Somebody who's not literally the most influential writer in English-speaking history. Because really, it's a banger pick, but it's also such a basic bitch-ass take. It's like saying Ocarina of Time is your favorite video game. Like, no it isn't, you just said that because IGN said it is. Lincoln is going on the C tier, should have abolished that basic-ass taste in literature.
I believe in Jesus, guns, and babies.
So, when researching this video, the first thing that came up when I researched for George's favorite book was the Holy Bible, okay. Though this guy is seriously obsessed with the Bible, he's read the whole thing multiple times, reads it once every day, he probably cites it whenever his children ask for money. Interestingly enough, he's known for being an avid reader, so I figured that finding out what his favorite book is would really not be that difficult. Unfortunately, this has been one of the most annoying fucking searches I've had to make for this video. And it's not even the worst one. So while searching for his favorite books, you get a few options. At one point he recommended The Stranger by Albert Camus, so didn't say what's his favorite. And at other points, when asked by Pizza Hut in 1999, he said his favorite book was It's a Very Hungry Caterpillar. Wait, no, this cannot be real. In 1999, Pizza Hut asked 50 US governors to name their favorite books from childhood. The then governor of Texas, George W. Bush, named A Very Hungry Caterpillar, despite having been 23 years old at the time of his publication. That was fucking funny. Ultimately, I found this TV broadcast from shortly after he won the presidency in 2000 that lists his 9 favorite books from adult reading to child reading for some reason. And I have heard of none of these. George, what the hell is this? Sarah's Flag for Texas? The Good Life and Its Discontents, The American Dream in the Age of Enlightenment, 1945 to 1995. What the hell is this textbook-ass title? Good lord. I didn't realize George has such a stick up his ass. I would have preferred Shakespeare or something, but no, it's just a bunch of American bullshit. There is only one book here that I've heard of, and it's The fucking Very Hungry Caterpillar. Okay, so in front of me I have 2 options. I can either pick one of the adult readings, which he presumably enjoys more than the children's reading, or I can take the much funnier option. One Sunday morning, the warm sun came up and pop! Out of the egg came a tiny and very hungry caterpillar. He started to look for some food. On Monday, he ate through 1 apple, but he was still hungry. Wait, I can't like, hit the... Yeah, the Kindle version doesn't really capture the magic. It's gonna be rather difficult to critique a book that's made for like actual iPad drooling babies. Caterpillar ate a lot, became a butterfly, and that's it? Wait, no, there's no way. 50 pages? The fuck you mean 50 pages? This shit doesn't even reach 10 goddamn pages. I paid $7 for this! Okay, so what can I even say about The Very Hungry Caterpillar? I guess for babies, there's good lessons here. You know, you learn to count, you learn about food, the metamorphosis of the caterpillar or something. Though I do have to wonder, why the hell is this so short? Like, even for a children's book, this is ridiculous. I'm assuming that maybe the kid will like ask questions as their parent is reading it to them. Could serve as a conversation starter maybe. Kid would be like, hey dada, what kind of Swiss cheese is the caterpillar eating, since there's like a lot of those? And then the dad will be like, fuck if I know, this was clearly written by an American. I hate to keep talking shit about the length, but like, when I was a kid, my mom read me the 7 Habits of Happy Children. You know, not a particularly long book, but I don't remember it lasting like actual 10 seconds. So it is possible to make a baby's book that doesn't make me feel, like I said, fire to $7. Also, can I point out that caterpillars aren't really known for eating processed foods like he does in the book? And my man ate an entire chocolate bar, an ice cream cone, and a whole ass sausage. So I don't know, I don't think he'd turn into a butterfly, I think he'd just fucking die. Yeah, I don't know how much more content I can get out of this. Book's fine, I guess. Maybe don't get the Kindle version since you kind of lose out on the experience. Will say, it's a pretty unique pick, but also, it's a fucking very hungry caterpillar. I'll put George next to William in the B tier for now.
Is Elmo now, or has he ever been, a member of the Communist Party of the United States?
Now, unlike some of the presidents I've talked about so far on this list, finding Obama's favorite book was hilariously easy. Obama is an avid reader and publishes all his favorite reads on Twitter each year, and he also has a lot of places where he's recommending books. Now this does present a small problem because Obama has recommended a lot of books, but has never pointed out which one is his favorite. Instead, he just recommends a variety of what he thinks are the most impactful books in general or of any given year. Since I could pretty much pick any book that he's stated as being significant to him, I am going to go off of this article where it states that the 2 books he most frequently talks about are Self-Reliance by Ralph Waldo Emerson and Song of Solomon by Toni Morrison. I'm only doing one though, and since I don't know how much content I can get out of a 1841 essay about the nature of existence or something, I decided on Morrison. I'm not super familiar with Morrison's work. Last year, for one of my literature courses, I had to read her debut, The Bluest Eyes, though I just was not bothered enough to actually finish the whole thing. You see, I'm an avid reader until my literature degree tells me to read, in which case I'm like, well, now I don't want to. Song of Solomon is probably the most intricate and layered novel I've talked about so far. You know, in a video that's filled with like hungry caterpillars, we finally have actual literature. Song of Solomon follows the entire life of one black man named Macon Dead Jr., nicknamed Milkman over the fact that he was breastfed until he was like 5, and his struggles with both his extremely dysfunctional family and the hate crimes committed against African Americans during the 50s and 60s in the United States. I want to mention that this was probably one of the more difficult reads for me to do for this video. Morrison writes in a way that demands your attention. You spaced out for one paragraph and all of a sudden 8 years have passed, 3 new plot points have been introduced, and every character's been replaced with chicken nuggets. Do not take this as a complaint though. I think the prose is actually one of the book's strongest aspects. Rarely does Morrison try to build scenes like you'd see in a lot of commercial fiction or even modern day movies, but instead she's constantly bouncing between raw character thoughts and summarized actions. It's the kind of prose that is not only very unique in its imagery, but also refuses to waste your time. Solid rumbling, likely to erupt without prior notice. Macon kept each member of his family awkward with fear. His hatred of his wife glittered and sparked in every word he spoke to her. The disappointment he felt in his daughters sifted down on them like ash, dulling the battery complexions and choking the lid out of what should have been girlish voices. Under the frozen heat of his glance, they tripped over door sills and dropped the salt cellar in the yolks of their poached eggs. The way he mangled their grace, wit, and self-esteem was the single excitement of their days. Without the tension and drama he ignited, they might not have been known what to do with themselves. In his absence, his daughters bent their necks over blood-red squares of velvet and waited eagerly for any hint of him, and his wife, Ruth, began her days stunned in stillness by her husband's contempt and ended them wholly animated by it. You got a lot of strong imagery in this paragraph that's assisted by very creative and unique metaphors and similes. But more importantly, Morrison doesn't just throw out these literary techniques willy-nilly. She uses them very tactically, specifically, to enhance the story being told. Case in point, showcasing the stranglehold that Macon Dead, the protagonist's father, has over his family and the terror they have over him. But what I also like about Morrison is that she not only writes a lot of very compelling family drama through sheer conflict, but she's also not afraid of juxtaposing this with some of just the most disgusting sentences I've ever read in my life. Fair warning, this export is kind of graphic. In the bed, that's where she was when I opened the door, lying next to him, naked as a yard dog, kissing him. Him dead and white and puffy and skinny, and she had his fingers in her mouth. That is right, what I have just read to you is a woman sucking on the fingers of her dead father. Paragraphs like these are sprinkled all throughout the book, and they really make a massive impact, and they stick out to you. Like, I will never forget this shit. And speaking of the family conflict, Morrison really shows her mastery over how to tell a story in the literary form in the way she tells the story of each individual family member. Because unlike in something like, say, Red October, where it's just this long expositionary backstory, Morrison instead takes a specific part of a character's life or a specific thing that happened to them and uses that to convey who they are. Such as Milkman's 40-year-old sister, Corinthians, who's ashamed of her romantic partner because she's worried about what her dad might think about him. And this leads to one of the most elaborate romantic dramas in the book, which showcases just how much of a fucking child this character is. Morrison never needs to blatantly state it for you. This character is fucking pathetic. This character at 40 years old is so deathly afraid about what her dad might think about her boyfriend. It is so goddamn pathetic. Really, every character in this book is pathetic. The sharp sentences with disgusting descriptions breathes life into these characters that are fucking children. These stories are filled with so much irony, contrast, and the choices the characters make reveal so much about them. And the thing is, there are multiple of these throughout the book. It's not just Corinthians. There's an entire chapter dedicated to Ruth. There's one dedicated to Macon Dead Jr.'s father, Macon Dead. Even snippets dedicated to other side characters like Guitar, which I'll get into in a moment. You'd think these stories would be completely isolated from each other, but actually no, they connect in some pretty subtle ways, with one small detail in one story becoming a major player in a different one, which with each of them adding on to this family and how they came to be. Now, I've talked a lot about the family, but I haven't actually talked about the protagonist himself, Milkman. He is a fantastic protagonist that lies in the middle of what is otherwise one of the most dysfunctional families on the goddamn planet. Unlike most every other character in the book, Milkman is the least tragic and pathetic. In fact, almost everything is just handed to him. He adopts his father's business, which is very successful. His girlfriend is, to him, the most beautiful woman in town, who is also like his second cousin, but whatever. Milkman, at his core, is a character who, unlike everybody else, doesn't really have any problems, which, ironically, that in and of itself turns into a problem. He has no purpose, no goal. He has a business, but he lives in his father's shadow. He has a beautiful girl, but she tries to kill him. Okay, that part actually kind of sucks. So how do you navigate this character? In a book filled with layers and idiocy and flawed characters, how do you introduce a man like Milkman? This is where his opposite comes into play. Guitar. Not like an actual guitar, just like a guy named Guitar. Guitar is an extremist. Unlike Milkman, he has suffered a lot of what the African American population went through in the time period he lives in. He's a massive protester against racism, but unlike somebody like, say, MLK, he believes that the only answer is violence, and this can be seen in cases such as his opinion on the real-life Emmett Till case or his opinions on the Civil War. While Milkman has a general disinterest in everything, he and Guitar still have a disconnect. Milkman doesn't really have any strong extremist opinions, but Guitar thinks that all white people should be exterminated. This then leads Guitar into joining a pseudo-terrorist organization that is dedicated to killing an innocent white person every time an innocent black person is killed. Like not even killing the guy who did the killing, just killing some random white person to keep things balanced. This profound radicalization drives a wedge between the two characters that will serve as the major conflict of the book in the second half. This leads into a more profound exploration of black conflicts from the time period and how this kind of extreme radicalization usually only leads to more suffering and infighting. But Song of Solomon goes so far beyond than just black culture and a dysfunctional family. Really, the core of the book is its protagonist, Milkman. The second half is dedicated almost exclusively to this Odyssey-style adventure, wherein he learns the truth about his family and where he came from. Granted, this part becomes kind of unnecessarily complicated with his family tree, but still it's a satisfying way to bring about the character. All of this leads to an open ending that I'm not gonna spoil, because really you should read this book yourself. And I'm gonna say the ending seems to have pissed off a lot of people, but it also pissed off me. Morrison, what the hell was that? It didn't even really conclude anything! God, I have questions. While I have not read a Morrison book before this, I will say Song of Solomon is potentially one of the best books I've read in quite a while. It's a profoundly emotional yet deeply insightful text that takes the literary genre to its farthest extent. Each word is used to its maximum potential, and each character is used to tell a profoundly moving story. Obama is going on the S tier. Shit, I forgot we were talking about presidents. Does Trump even know what a book is? Okay, if you haven't seen the time code already, you are really gonna have to bear with me for this next section. Trump and his favorite book could be an entire video in its own right. Okay, even though you might have seen me pull this article up continuously to determine which book is any given president's favorite, you might be surprised to learn that it's not the only source I used. I cross-referenced this with pretty much whatever else I could find. With that said, for the vast majority of presidents, I have not have to look that deep, because with the exception of George, they've all made it quite clear what their favorite book is. Donald Trump, however, is a fucking enigma. First of all, it's been quite clear from all my research that this man does not read. I don't even know if he's literate. He has stated in the past that his favorite book is the Holy Bible, which would not count for this video, but even if it did, I sincerely doubt he's actually read it. In an interview he did with Bloomberg in 2015, he was asked to name his favorite Bible quote, and bro could not name a single one.
I'm wondering what one or two of your most favorite Bible verses are and why.
I wouldn't want to get into it because to me that's very personal. You know, when I talk about the Bible, it's very personal, so I don't want to get into verses. I don't want to get into.
There's no verse that means a lot to you that you think about or cite.
The Bible means a lot to me, but I don't want to get into specifics.
Like my brother in Christ, my literal brother in Christ. How could you not name a single quote from the goddamn Bible? Even I can do that, and I'm not Christian. Furthermore, the more I researched, the more things just got muddier. According to himself, his second favorite book is The Art of the Deal, which he fucking wrote. Though actually, in my research, it turns out that might not even be the case. But then it gets weirder, because I finally ran into this website that lists a variety of books that Trump has stated to be his favorites. And I'm like, finally, okay, actual information. Trump's favorite book, according to this website, is Hitler! Apparently, back in the 80s and early 90s, Trump was an avid reader of Mein Kampf and stated it to be one of his favorite books. When I saw this, I was like, there's no way. There's just no way this is real. But nope, according to his ex-wife, it's real. Hello, editing Adrian, here to clarify a few things. So I realized while I was editing this that the first article I mentioned was supposed to be a parody, which is kind of funny because as far as I can tell, it's very accurate. So I don't really know if the comedy is supposed to come from the fact that it's so true it's ridiculous or if it's all made up. But Trump most definitely read some Hitler-related stuff. Now, in all technicality, the second article I mentioned didn't say that Trump read Mein Kampf, but instead My New Order, which is a collection of Hitler's speeches. Though in that same article, it says that Trump himself said that he was gifted Mein Kampf by a Jewish friend, which is not what his ex-wife says. So I guess there is conflicting information here, but as we'll see, Trump is a compulsive liar. But also, I don't know in what universe it's better to have consistently read Mein Kampf over multiple years to the point where you kept it in your cabinet over My New Order. So, yeah, editing Adrian out. Oh god, I needed that. And finally, I found this interview where he stated that his favorite book is All Quiet on the Western Front, which would finally qualify for this list. But I feel the need to show you the full quote real quick. When asked what some of his favorite reads were, he first quoted the Ed Klein book on Hillary Clinton, which looks like this, some random Richard Nixon book he doesn't know the name of, and finally, All Quiet on the Western Front, and not even mentioning the author because he probably doesn't know that. So with all of this in mind, we go back to what is Trump's favorite read. Sadly, I don't think we'll ever know. He's too busy right now renaming the Gulf of Mexico to the Gulf of Cum or whatever. So we're left with a small handful of questionable choices. Now we go back to the age-old question, do I pick the appropriate option or do I pick the much funnier one? You know which one I picked. Okay, so far in this video, I've tried to maintain as much neutrality as possible when talking about the presidents, but doing that for Trump is going to be exceedingly difficult. And while I will try to stay as neutral as possible and not have my bias show, I want to make it clear that I am not a Trump fan, and this book has made me even less of a Trump fan. The Art of the Deal has been a fascinating book to read. Not because it's good, mind you, it's kind of a complete failure in every way imaginable, but because it gives such a deep dive into the mind of Donald Trump if you read between the lines. The Art of the Deal is basically a series of narrations of Trump's big business deals in the 70s and 80s, ranging from casinos to real estate to an ice skating rink in New York. It's a book that's profoundly about business for business people. Hey, I'm in a business. I like Shark Tank. Maybe after reading this, I'll finally have the business savvy skills to pitch to Kevin O'Leary my new Control-C, Control-V keys that are the size of massive Lego bricks and cost $15. You thought I just made that up, but nope, it's a real product. It's on Shark Tank.
Look how relaxed the hand is with the coffee keyboard. Ooh, oh.
Now, in my opinion, there are several reasons for why somebody would want to read this book, but there's three primary ones. The first is to read about Trump's business exploits. The second is to learn actual business strategies that the average person could apply to their everyday life. And the last is to read the book as just pure entertainment and to learn more about Trump's life. Let's start with the first one, reading and learning from Trump's business exploits. While I read this book, I went in it with the mindset that Trump is a good businessman. I might not agree with his politics, but he's gotta know something with his $5 billion estimated net worth. But as I was reading these retellings, something felt off. Something clearly wasn't right. Throughout these deals, Trump portrays himself as a total Mary Sue. He never makes mistakes, he's never defeated, he never takes a moment to self-reflect over his actions. There are some moments where it looks like he's finally made a mistake, but then he somehow spins it into being a good thing actually. Like for example, when he was in charge of Trump Tower, his competitor Museum Tower lowered their prices. This freaked out his employees because they thought consumers would naturally pick the cheaper option, but Trump wasn't worried about this at all. He's 5 steps ahead of them. Trump states that yes, Museum Tower has lower prices, but this will just mean that the rich customers are gonna flock to Trump Tower, as the higher price will make it seem like it has a more exclusive premium. He offers no evidence that this is anything but conjecture, but treats it as a victory anyway. This happens all the time with Trump. His business skills are borderline superhuman, and this immediately set off red flags in my mind. Just how true is everything that Trump says? Because a lot of what happens here is just way too convenient. It's too favorable to him to be real. This is when I took to the internet and found Tony Schwartz. Now, as it turns out, Donald Trump didn't really write much of The Art of the Deal. In fact, pretty much all of it was written by the guy stated as the co-writer in the cover, Tony Schwartz. Schwartz, in the years since the book's publication, has actually been very vocal online and has stated a strong discontent for Trump since he became president. He wrote this article for the Washington Post, where he gives a detailed breakdown of what the Art of the Deal is actually. Because oh boy, so many of my observations align perfectly with what Schwartz says in this article. It's almost scary. To start, according to Schwartz, the vast majority of Trump's deals from the books were complete failures, yet Trump still insisted they be described as successes. He gives the examples of the casinos explored in Chapter 8, which were going to bankruptcy as Trump was writing the book. and also a competitor to the NFL that Trump got involved in and promptly sent it to bankruptcy. I want to really deep dive into the latter because oh boy is that a story. Chapter 11 of the book is dedicated to Trump's time in the USFL, which was a rising football league in the 80s that was close to becoming competition for the NFL. However, it never quite managed to cross that threshold between up-and-coming league and serious competition. This is when Trump got involved. The main problems with the USFL seemed fairly clear-cut and not at all difficult to remedy. The first was that the league was playing its games in the spring. Sports have their seasons, and fans like their football in the fall. The first thing to do was to move the seasons to the fall. Up until this point, the USFL had their games take place in the spring to prevent directly competing with the NFL. Probably a wise decision considering the NFL has a near monopoly in all things football. But Trump, I'm telling ya, 5 steps ahead. He is so good at business, his decisions don't even make any sense. He wants to move the league to the fall since fans like their football in the fall. Again, he gives no statistics to prove that what he's saying is anything beyond conjecture, but more importantly, a decision like this would mean directly competing with the NFL, which most people involved know is not gonna happen. The NFL is too big. Not just that, it has exclusive broadcasting deals with all 3 major broadcasting networks. Where are people even gonna watch the league during the season? Not a problem, says Trump. We'll sue the NFL for anti-competitive practices and hope for either a large settlement or a courtroom victory, which will lead to the disillusionment of the contracts that prevent the USFL from broadcasting in the 3 major networks in the fall. Seems like a good plan? It wasn't. In fact, nobody in the USFL thought it was a good plan, and multiple people told Trump directly that it was a terrible idea. But more importantly, why even bother? The USFL was already doing decently well in the spring. There's no need to go full hog wild with it. But Trump, 17 steps ahead. Come on, guys, have some faith. He's gotta know what he's doing. He goes to court, sues the shit out of the NFL, and a lengthy years-long trial is born. A verdict was finally given, and in a feat of impossible metrics, Trump won the case. A jury of his peers deemed the NFL's actions to be anti-competitive, which means that now all that's left is to collect that sweet, sweet cash reward. And so the jury awarded Trump $1. What, you might ask? $1. Now I know what you're thinking. You mean $1 million. Nope. $1 more billion? Nope. Just one spanking George Washington. That's it. Oh wait, no, sorry. There's a law in New York that says that whatever cash reward has to be tripled for some reason. So Trump's total reward after years of lawsuits and courtroom trials was $3 whole. My god, not even Mr. Krabs would do all of this for $3. Can't even get a fucking hot dog in Manhattan. The entire lawsuit, spearheaded by Trump, was a complete and utter catastrophe. While the NFL did lose part of its stronghold over football, it didn't really matter because the USFL went to bankruptcy the same year. All because one orange man wanted to be king of football. Yet for some reason, Trump portrays this as a victory. He claims his ideas were fine and just blames whoever was in front of him at the time for whatever bad thing happened. He's like me blaming my teammates and Marvel rivals for being dog shit. At the end of the book, he writes about how he was in the middle of processing an appeal that he was confident could get the ruling changed, but oh boy, is hindsight a bitch. Going back to Schwartz and the Washington Post article, everything I've just said aligns pretty perfectly. Early on, I recognized that Trump's sense of self-worth is forever at risk. When he feels aggrieved, he reacts impulsively and defensively, constructing a self-justifying story that doesn't depend on facts and always direct the blame to others. Most everybody who worked on the USFL, as stated by this article by ESPN, agreed that the push for a fall season and lawsuit against the NFL were the main reasons for why it failed. There was even an entire documentary made about the topic where Trump was interviewed and once again put the blame on everyone but him. Not only that, but when the documentary came out, he called the director a loser and the film a third-rate documentary. So his business exploits throughout the book are either not true or likely ended in failure. But what about the potential business lessons you could learn from the book? Sure, he failed, but there's gotta be something going on for him if he's amassed so much money. Trying to put myself in the mindset of somebody reading this book to learn about business, which I feel like is a lot of people, I made a note of any business advice that Trump explicitly states, which was a good exercise because if you just try to decipher what the moral of the story is with each chapter, you're gonna have a very hard time because most of the chapters are just dedicated to him describing the gazillion rooms he wants to add in Trump Tower. There's really not a lot of decision making or negotiating going around. But now I have amassed every single piece of direct business advice that Trump gives. Finally, I can pitch to Mark Cuban my big red $40 mute button for Zoom calls. That one is also real. Now for me, the best advice books are the ones that really go against the grain. You don't want to just say a bunch of generic shit that most people will either agree with or probably just figure out on their own. Take something like Atomic Habits, that's a good advice book. With that said, The Art of the Deal has some of the most generic goddamn business advice imaginable. Be persistent, talk to the manager, don't give up. That's kind of it. He never really dissects what makes his business deals or negotiating skills work. He just tells the story, and maybe if he feels like it, he'll add a pretty general moral of the story. And sometimes that moral of the story doesn't even really make sense with what he's just said. I will try to be generous for a moment. If there is one thing I was able to personally dissect from the book, is to know what you are doing. Know who you're negotiating with, know what you're negotiating about, the ins and outs of pretty much everything. Kind of like a modern version of Sun Tzu's Know Thyself and Know Thy Enemy. Yet I also feel like this interpretation is giving Trump too much credit. And this is because if you really dissect everything and take everything that Trump presents as fact, you realize that the two skills that truly make a difference in Trump's stories are not be persistent, they're not talk to the manager, they're not know thyself. Really, it's just have real estate connections and just dumb luck. There's one point where he wants to buy a space in New York to build Trump Tower and the owner says no. He insists for months to buy the space and eventually it turns out that the owner went to bankruptcy. And since Trump was already interested, he decided to sell to Trump. But how in the hell could he have known that the place was going to bankruptcy? And the good chance it hadn't, the entire thing would have been a waste of time. You could argue persistence is key, but that's just not practical. What am I gonna do? Walk up to my neighbor and be like, yo, can I buy your fucking house? And when I'm inevitably told no, I just keep asking until I get a goddamn restraining order? If he had some kind of mathematical formula that could predict which places are best to put your time into, even if it had a like 60% failure rate, that would be something. But no, it all just boils down to dumb luck. Okay, I'm gonna stop for a moment and put a bit of a parenthesis here. I wrote the script a few months ago, and it just dawned on me that this strategy of insisting on buying something until he gets it is literally what he is doing right now with Greenland. And boy, is that working out for him. This man has not changed strategies in almost 40 years. Good lord. Anyway, moving on. Another example. Trump buys a building with the intent of selling, but the current tenants refuse to move out. This means that the sale takes a lot longer than he initially expected, which is very frustrating to him. It takes a while, but eventually he manages to kick out the tenants, and it just so happens that in the time it took him to do this, New York real estate shot up in value and he was able to sell the building for a lot more than he would have if he had sold it when he initially wanted. He frames the story as sometimes losing the battle gives you a new way to win the war, which alludes to his skills as a businessman. But when you really look at the situation, you realize he just got lucky. What if New York real estate hadn't shot up in value? What if the opposite happened? Then he'd be fucked. Again, unless he has some kind of elaborate mathematical equation that lets him predict when New York real estate is going to shoot up in value or shoot down in value, then this whole venture is nothing more than very expensive gambling. Now, I know saying this, some of you might find this difficult to believe. You might think, well, he's gotta be at least passable in business. He is worth an estimated $5 billion in net worth. So that can't all be just luck and nepotism. There is no way for a man to get this lucky without having some sort of gift for business. But here's the thing, his luck isn't even that good. In fact, his luck is kinda dog shit actually. According to this article written by Fortune, if Trump had just put all of his father's inheritance money into an index fund in the late 80s, he would be worth approximately up to $13 billion in 2015 alone. God knows how much he would be worth today. If he hadn't done all of these business ventures, he would be worth almost $10 billion more than he is today. By all means, it looks like I will not be acquiring the business skills necessary to pitch to Lori Greiner my new surgically implanted brain chip that lets me control electronic devices through mind control or something. You thought I was gonna do the old 1-2-1 and reveal that the product I just mentioned is made up in order to break the pattern that I established with the first two Shark Tank jokes. But nope, that's a real product that was on Shark Tank!
Within its center are Bluetooth electronics, and at its tip, a microphone, a speaker, and an AC charging.
As a book about Trump's achievement, it's questionable. As a book for business advice, it's dog shit. But let's look at it from the perspective as just a good book to read. As you can guess, it fucking sucks. Trump is a Mary Sue, he never faces any struggles, there's nothing resembling a storyline or any plot-like elements. You might say it's unfair to judge a non-fiction book via the same metrics I would use to judge a fiction book, but the thing is that some of the best non-fiction books, especially memoirs, which The Art of the Deal partially is, follow a lot of what make the best fiction books good. They have characters, nuance, storylines with beginning, middles, and ends. None of this is in The Art of the Deal. But what about the prose? Well, Tony Schwartz actually writes pretty well. He does a good job of taking Trump's completely incoherent thoughts and giving them form. Tony Schwartz is a decent writer, and while he might not have a lot in the way of a distinct style, in the same way somebody like Morrison has a distinct style, he does know how to write a punchy sentence. He takes the thoughts of a man who doesn't even know what a sentence fragment is and gives it form. So overall, the writing is actually pretty decent, if just kind of there. You might think I hate The Art of the Deal with everything I've said so far, and you'd be right, but there is one thing about this book that sticks out to me a lot. And really, it's where my whole fascination with it comes from. To me, the true value of The Art of the Deal doesn't come in Trump's business ventures, or business advice, or its integrity as a work of art, but the true value comes from using it as a way to dissect how Trump's mind works. Trump not only talks about his business deals, but also about his family and uprising, which includes a lot of odd moments that reveal who he really is, such as his very tumultuous relationship with his father. Fred Trump was a very demanding dad. He expected a lot from his children, but especially from his oldest son, Fred Trump Jr., who is Donald Trump's older brother. Tragically, Fred Trump Jr. died of alcoholism in his 40s. Fred Trump Sr. saw this as a sign of weakness and implanted this sort of dog-eat-dog world mentality into his children. This led to a sort of transactional relationship between Donald Trump and his father, Fred Trump. The relationship wasn't so much about love between father and son, but it's about son proving himself to his father. Trump never really comes out and says it, but this kind of relationship with his father was pretty toxic and has led them to view every encounter with anybody as a battle to be won, and anything that's not a blatant victory is failure. This actually explains a lot of Trump's delusions over the book, why he feels the need to portray all these business ventures that ended in failure as victories, even though they weren't, why he's always blaming other people and never taking accountability, because in his mind, to admit any sort of wrongdoing would mean being a failure. Complete, unequivocal failure. There is one very illuminating moment when Trump talks about his childhood where he mentions his time with a school music teacher. According to him, when he was in second grade, he punched his second grade school teacher in the face because he thought he knew nothing about music. This is already pretty revealing of what child Trump was like, but it's even more revealing of adult Trump writing the book, looking back on this moment with fondness. He portrays it as if it was a good thing. Oh, I was such a rapscallion back in the day. I never let anybody tell me what to do. And it's like, brother, why are you proud of this? You were a physically violent child. There is nothing to be proud of here. Except, as I was researching this, it turns out, not even. It's all bullshit. He just made it up. I want to mention another paragraph that I thought was very revealing. In this section, Trump is writing about some sculptures he had destroyed and then got backlash for destroying them from a series of journalists, where he writes, "It was not the sort of publicity you like to get. Looking back, I regret that I had the sculptures destroyed." When I first read this, I was like, holy shit, Trump is actually self-reflecting over his actions. But I swear to God, I shit you not, the line after this is, "I'm not convinced they were truly valuable, and I still think that a lot of my critics were phonies and hypocrites, but I understand now that certain events can take on symbolic importance. Frankly, I was too young, and perhaps in too much of a hurry, to take that into account. The point is that despite what some people might think, I'm not looking to be the bad guy when it isn't absolutely necessary." Brother, where does the regret come from then? Why do you regret anything? It sounds to me like you don't regret shit. You're not even taking the actual sculptures or what people are saying about you into account. You're only thinking about yourself, you narcissistic piece of shit. I want to conclude with one final remark from Tony Schwartz that I think is the most insightful of them all. From the very first time I interviewed him in his office in Trump Tower in 1985, the image I had of Trump was that of a black hole. Whatever goes in quickly disappears without a trace. Nothing sustains. It's forever uncertain when someone or something will throw Trump off his precarious perch, when his sense of equilibrium will be threatened and he'll feel an overwhelming compulsion to restore it. Beneath his bluff exterior, I always sensed a hurt, incredibly vulnerable little boy who just wanted to be loved. What a poetic way to look at the current president of the United States. Okay, this Trump section has gone on far too long, so going back to the tier list, I think we can pretty safely just take Trump and banish him to the shadow realm.
America is a nation that can be defined in a single word. I was going to put him
Does Joe Biden even know, like, anything at this point? So, Sleepy Joe's favorite book is Ulysses. Why? So last year, when I was in England, I read some passages of Ulysses. I liked it, I guess. I understood fuck all. And then I met this one guy who was like really into Ulysses, and he sent me this page that's meant to serve as like a reading guide for reading Ulysses. And I was like, okay. And then I tried reading Ulysses again, and the guide only made it make like 5% more sense. I mean, from what I understood, it was good, I guess. I mean, the prose definitely interesting, but also, I'm not reading all that. I am not bothered to read an almost 700-page long text that only somebody living in Dublin in the late 1800s will understand. Now, Sleepy Joe has said that it's not just Ulysses, but James Joyce as a whole that's his favorite literature or something. So we're doing Dubliners. I am not bothered enough. Fuck you. So first I want to mention that as I was reading the first paragraph of the first story of Dubliners, I realized that I've actually read this story before. I had to read the first short story, The Sisters, in one of my literature courses like 2 years ago. I only vaguely understood what it was about because I was like half paying attention. I just can't believe that Sleepy Joe is making me do coursework. Okay, James Joyce, one of the most important writers in the English language, probably the most important Irish writer, period. His most famous work, Ulysses, considered one of the most important pieces ever written in the English language. And similarly, Dubliners is considered one of the most important short story collections ever written. I want to say this was the most difficult book for me to both read and write about. I mean, going into it, already my expectations were high. The guy who wrote the preface to this edition of the book described Dubliners as having some of the best sentences written in the English language, which boy is that a statement. When reading Dubliners, but also reading all the other books I've read for this video so far, I've tried to really get to the heart of the text. I want to understand what it is the writer is trying to say so I can then properly deconstruct it and form an opinion on it. I want to say this has probably been the hardest book to do this for so far because my god is this book boring. Already, I'm not a massive short story collection guy. I like a short story every now and then. You know, like Chekhov, he's written a lot of good ones. Kafka, Metamorphosis, that's a banger of a short story right there. But collections, it's just 200 pages that doesn't hold my interest, you know? Now, I will say there were some advantages. On one hand, if I didn't like a story, I could breathe safely knowing that in like a dozen pages or so, there would be a different short story that I may or may not like. It was as if there would be something new around every corner, like opening a loot box in Overwatch. And I did find some things that I could really like and appreciate in the book. Like a lot of these revered writers, James Joyce focuses a lot on his prose. And some of the prose in this book is truly beautiful and writes in a way that I haven't really seen in other books, especially other books in this video, the only real comparison being Morrison. Like take the first paragraph of the short story Clay. The matron had given her leave to go out as soon as the woman's tea was over, and Maria looked forward to her evening out. The kitchen was spick and span. The cook said you could see yourself in the big copper boilers. The fire was nice and bright, and on one of the side tables were 4 very big barmbracks. These barmbracks seemed uncut, but if you went closer, you would see that they had been cut into long, thick, even slices, and were ready to be handed around at tea. Maria had cut them herself. Lots of great imagery here. He really puts you into the kitchen and uses sensory details to enhance the experience. The fire evokes warmth. Words like spick and span convey the tidiness of the place. And there's a personal touch to it as well. It's curious that Joyce describes the barmbracks in an almost first-person manner by saying if you went closer you would see that they had been cut into long, thick, even slices. It's almost as if I am in the room and I'm taking a few steps to get a closer look at the barmbracks. There are layers to how Joyce builds a paragraph. And paragraphs like these are scattered all throughout the short stories. Now I do have some notable observations about the prose, because even though you have a lot of these great paragraphs, there's also the occasional part where you get a really kind of bland paragraph actually. A very sullen-faced man stood at the corner of O'Connell Bridge waiting for the little Sandymount tram to take him home. He was full of smoldering anger and revengefulness. He felt humiliated and discontented. He did not even feel drunk, and he had only 2 pence in his pocket. He cursed everything he had done for himself in his office, pawned his watch, spent all his money, and had not even got drunk. He lost his reputation as a strong man, having been defeated twice by a mere boy. His heart swelled with fury, and when he thought of the woman in the big hat who had brushed against him and said pardon, his fury nearly choked him. I'm not gonna sit here and say this paragraph is bad. It's actually a really good paragraph. There is some pretty good indirect writing here when describing the man, but it's notable to see how there's a lot of very blatant descriptions. Sullen face, full of smoldering anger and vengefulness, felt humiliated and discontented. How could this not be better if you use more indirect cues to show how the character is feeling instead of just blatantly spelling it this way? Do you really need to say he felt humiliated when just a few lines later he says that he lost his reputation as a strong man, having been defeated twice by a mere boy? Doesn't that more or less give you an idea that he feels humiliated? Small details. I'm not saying this is a bad paragraph. I actually think it's a really good paragraph. But sometimes this style of writing just doesn't really connect with me. Do you really need these long paragraphs to describe something that can be described much simpler and with more indirect subtext instead of just saying it blatantly. Sometimes it's not even the writing itself that's a problem, but the way it's used. Here's an example from the short story A Mother. This entire opening section is dedicated to just describing the characters and their backstory. There's no real plot, there's no problem introduction, it's pure exposition. Granted, it's pretty and reads easily, yet it still fails to capture my attention instantly. 3 pages in, and I am bored out of my mind wondering where the hell this is even going. I really just want Joyce to get to the point as fast as possible instead of spending so much time on these characters and their intricate backstories. Now, I'm also aware that by saying this, I am criticizing one of the things that people really like about Joyce. If not, one of the things that make him such a great writer to begin with. I feel like some diehard Joyce fans watching this video are probably cringing out of their minds right now. But that's the problem with someone like me reviewing Joyce. It's just really not for me. I can appreciate the skilled writing, but I just can't really get sucked into it. And this is not helped by stories that are so boring. My god. So many of these stories, just nothing fucking happen. Araby is a story about a guy who goes to a market to buy something and then doesn't. Evelyn is about a woman. That's it. I get that there's more going on, okay? I know there's nuances and problems within these people's lives, but would it kill ya to have like an inciting event or something? Something resembling a plot? Cause my god, I'm not asking for a Michael Bay movie here, just something. You know, maybe if I delved really deep into the historical context and personal meaning behind each of these stories, then I could enjoy them more. I know that I'm being pretty unfair here to Joyce to criticize the book just because it's not really what I like reading, which is why I do want to take a moment to acknowledge how groundbreaking this book is. Dubliners follows a lot of taboo topics from the time, such as relevant politics and religion and social classes. Grace, which is probably my favorite short story of them all, is literally just a conversation between a bunch of men about Protestants and Catholics. It's a very illuminating conversation. Earlier, I complained about Joyce taking too much time to building out these character backstories, but part of what makes these short stories work is that you do understand these character backstories so profoundly that when you get into something like the conversations about Protestants and Catholics, you profoundly understand why these characters say the things they are saying. I still think it's boring as shit, but I see why it's there. Going on to the tier list, I'd say Dubliners is a relatively unique pick for an American, but still kind of generic. I enjoyed reading parts of it, and I think it's a very groundbreaking and important book. It's also boring as shit. B tier for Sleepy Joe. Go back to playing Minecraft with Trump and Obama, goddammit. So that's it, ladies and gentlemen. A very objective US president's tier list. Do not question me, do not criticize me, because I am right in everything. Honestly, this was a really fun exercise. That's the video. Subscribe for more presidents, and I'll see you next time.